to the Nova Moon channel. My name is Ali, and today I'm so excited to be sharing with you the first of my soul contract series photo readings, where I look at the energy of people that I'm guided to connect to and ask them a series of questions around their soul contract, what that meant, how they feel about it now looking back, and any lessons, any observations that they wish to share. And today's, as you can see, is Margaret Thatcher, former Prime Minister of Great Britain, and it promises to be an interesting reading. I put this disclaimer as required. Whilst I take my craft very seriously, this reading should be considered as entertainment. And so, as I started the reading, sometimes what I do is I will draw cards before I connect. And that's what I did on this occasion. So you'll see that what I drew was the King of Cups, and then the card on the top of the deck was the Fool, and the card on the bottom of the deck was the Strength card. Now, I'm no tarot expert. Those of you who've seen my readings on my channel will see I always read with Oracle, but I was really drawn to the tarot, so that's what I did. You may or may not agree with what I feel came from these cards, but let me tell you what my sense was as I looked at them in conjunction with Lady Thatcher and her energy. So the King of Cups I felt was quite an apposite card for her. She was a level-headed woman. She was very much in control of her emotions, although those of us who perhaps have seen the video or know a little more about her will remember that when she left her role as Prime Minister, there was film of her coming out of Downing Street, and she was very emotional. But mostly, she was someone who was known as not being terribly emotional. She was very clear-headed, very scientific. She was a trained scientist. And the King of Cups is all about control of emotions, using intellect to make decisions, and not letting circumstances, those things around us, sway us from making decisions. And I feel that's quite, that's quite key. I think that's definitely someone that she was. Then we have the Fool card on the top. And of course, the Fool card, as we all know, is around new beginnings, opportunities, of course. But actually, I want to put it out there that I felt that this could be, there just felt something very new about her energy. I don't think it's that people haven't connected to her. Of course they have. People have read, I'm sure, with her, connected to her since her death. But I felt that perhaps the photo reading that we did together was a new opportunity, perhaps a new way of her communicating. So there definitely did feel something new. Or maybe that's me putting my energy on there. It's a new thing for me to do, to show photo readings on my channel, which isn't something that I've done before. Anyway, let's move on to the final card, the bottom card. Now, whenever I read a bottom card, doesn't matter whether it's tarot for today's reading or whether it's an oracle card that I read for the rest of the time. For me, the bottom card always feels as though there was something a bit hidden, something maybe that I didn't pick up, someone else didn't pick up, they didn't want us to pick up. And I think that the Strength card is quite interesting in this position. And I don't believe that she was as strong as she liked to have us think. She did second guess herself, don't we all? Don't we all? But the image was very much that she didn't, that she was 100% clear. She knew what she was doing at all times. She wasn't going to be swayed from that, and she was this very tough woman. She was given the title Iron Lady by the Russians, I believe. And I think she quite liked that. I think she quite liked being thought of as someone who was very determined and very clear. So I thought it was really interesting to see that strength card on the bottom, and it did leave me thinking, let's see what comes up then as I begin this photo reading. So let me tell you more about photo readings, how they work. I don't know, perhaps you've never come across them before, perhaps you've come across them a lot, perhaps you read photos yourself. If you do, I would love to know how you find reading photos and what you do. So please feel free to comment on this reading. I'd love to know. So let me tell you a little bit about me. So I read photos. I have been reading photos for quite some time now, actually. I've got clients all over the world who I read photos for. I didn't really know that I could read energy of people. I suppose it's something that when you grow up being able to do it, you don't realise it's a thing, and you don't realise everyone else doesn't do it. And it wasn't until a very good friend of mine, through a series of situations which I shan't bore you with now, suggested that I might want to try doing that I did, and realised, oh goodness, actually, yeah, I do seem to pick things up from other people that maybe most people don't. And so how does it work for me? I sit with the photo itself. I put it on my altar. Obviously, people email them to me, so I print them out, put them on my altar. I put them with the crystals that I use, and so I leave them there for a little while and see their energy, and then I take the photos from my altar and sit with them. And then I do my own connecting rituals, which I'm sure everyone who does similar work will do. I'm not going to share everything I do, but I have noticed over the years that the more I connect to spirit, the more I connect to my guides and to the guides of those people I'm going to read, the more intricate those rituals have become. And so I sit then, once I've had the energy of the photo, I will connect with my guides, and I then connect with the energy of the guides I'm reading for, and also the photos if I am reading for an ancestor. So that will be the energy of the person who is now no longer with us. And it's really beautiful, really beautiful. I've been very lucky that I have been connecting with some extraordinary energies. And so that's how the photo reading works. Obviously then I will pick up messages, I will pick up energies, thought process, and then I write that all down, send it off to my client. But today, obviously, slightly differently, I'm going to be doing a video about what comes up. Okay, so let me talk very briefly about soul contract readings, and then we will move on to the reading itself. So soul contract readings, I really was very guided to start working with the energy of people who had died. Of course, that's not something unusual for me in my work, but this was a very particular set of work that I was being asked to do. And as I mentioned before, it was really looking at the contracts that we all come with. That's what I believe, that we all sign up to something to do when we come here, and how that soul contract has gone through that person's lifetime, and then as they look back, was it a great success or not? Why Margaret Thatcher? I was very guided to work with her. She came through a couple of times on other work I was doing, and also on my meditation, and she isn't someone that I know a huge amount about, although of course I am a Brit, as you will tell, and I am certainly of the age to have known of her and to have been around when she was Prime Minister. So I know that much, but I haven't read books about her, I haven't read lots of articles about her. I'm not someone who reads the news, watches the news, listens to the news, any of those things. I have definitely stepped away from all of that. So I know a bit about her, but not a huge amount, and I certainly don't know lots of detail. So here we go. Now, one of the things I would like to say before I step on with the first parts of this reading were that as I sat with her energy, I felt a lot of people come in behind me, a lot. And I really do mean a lot. I mean, the room felt very crowded, and there were people pushing around me, and the cards were sitting to the left of me as I was beginning to connect and prepare the document for writing what I picked up. And I felt someone come to the side of me just to pull away the cards, just to have another look and to see what there was there. And it led me to feel that she certainly was very much surrounded by people. There were people who were helping her with decisions, who were doing day-to-day tasks and chores for her, of course, as you would expect. But there were also people very much in her ear saying to her, well, you have to do this and you must do that. And, you know, let's just look at what it is you're thinking about. So that was a very interesting energy that came up. And I was guided to write these two things which I want to share with you about Lady Thatcher. The first was related to Freemasonry and the second was related to religion. So the first thing I was guided to share was that she was a female Mason. An exception was made for her. I don't know anything about the Masons actually, although I did check this fact out after I'd done the reading, and apparently it's quite unusual, certainly in those days, for women to be Masons. But I suppose, given who she was, the power that she had, the influence that she had, I suppose it probably wasn't a surprise that this exception was made for her. She didn't join many meetings, but she did enjoy the privilege of being connected to those who had levels of power, perhaps unattainable to others. The ordinary man in the street is what I was guided to write. So she was connected in her own right to the Freemasons. I'm not going to go into Freemasonry on this video, but she was connected, although her husband may also have been a Mason. Now, her husband was he was recognised in his own right, I think we can say, and her membership of the Masons wasn't related to his, although his name and his achievements did bring some additional connections for her in the early stages of her career, and also later on when her star was waning, if we can say that. The second point I wanted to make was that she was a religious woman. Her faith was very important to her. She didn't get to church as much as she would like. Her work was her all, is what I was guided to write. But she did take her religion very seriously. And sometimes vicars or ministers would come to her at Chequers. Chequers is the accommodation that comes with being a prime minister. It's the sort of weekend retreat, holiday retreat house. So that she could take some kind of religious instruction. Now, I wrote take communion, but I put it in inverted commas because I don't feel she was Catholic. I feel she was more C of E. So those of you who understand all of the rites and processes around the Church of England perhaps will understand what I mean, but there did really feel as though there was something that they came to help her with, to minister to her. It wasn't just about the service itself. And something else that I picked up and was guided to write was that during busy periods of her working life, she would yearn for the simplicity of church services. And I felt that was actually really quite interesting, that she did have this incredibly busy life. Of course, she was Prime Minister and she loved that, but there definitely was a side of her that also really liked the simplicity, the quiet, the lack of craziness, for want of a better word, that she would have found through her religion, that obviously being in politics was almost like polar opposites, I suppose. Okay, so I asked her a question. I said, did your belief in God drive your decisions? Did it help you with policy making. And she said, what you can see on the screen, I'm a scientific thinker. I made decisions based on evidence, on fact. I didn't allow emotion to cloud my judgment, but I always trusted that my decisions were rooted in good ethics, in morality, in what a good Christian would do for others. So then I asked her, well, do you think this made you popular? This idea that you were scientific in your decisions, do you think that the general public always agreed with you? And I was thinking there of the miners' strikes, which were, I think they were really what a lot of people have judged her prime ministership on, the terrible impact of the closure of the mines in England. And she said, I wasn't interested in being popular. I'm not a populist. I leave that to others, actors, musicians. Politicians aren't supposed to be popular. They're supposed to act in the best interest of those they serve, and we are here to serve. That means that sometimes unpopular decisions are made, but always scientifically and with and of fact. And so I thought, I want to ask more about this. So I said, well, and the miners' strikes, how does that fit? And she said, well, it was unfortunate, of course. Did I think of changing my mind about the miners' strikes? No, I couldn't. Did the cabinet? There were murmurings, there was discomfort, but we had to stick to our guns. We had to be seen to be strong and resolute in our decisions. We knew there would be pain. Of course, we didn't want to cause suffering, but I, believed in what we were doing and why. And as I was writing that, I could feel the energy of two politicians who were in the cabinet at the time, and they certainly felt uncomfortable. And there was a third, whose face I couldn't see. I could see the face of the other two. I don't really wish to share who they were, but I would say that this really does play into what I said earlier, in that she really felt she had to show they were absolutely resolute. She was absolutely resolute in all that she did. You know, this scientific thinker, very clear, very determined about what she was going to do. But you know, within the realms of the cabinet itself, her advisors, and I suspect her too, there were occasional times where they weren't always so sure of what they'd done. And frankly, they wouldn't have been human if they didn't have doubts occasionally. And there are, I should say, at this point, some people who do accuse her of not really being terribly humane in some of her decisions as Prime Minister. Okay, so then I wanted to ask her, well, what was your soul contract? When did you realise that what you were doing was your soul contract? And I called it a life calling as well, to be clear. And she said, my soul contract? Well, my soul contract was to be a good Christian, to be a good woman, to follow my beliefs and ethics, to rise to my potential. And I wanted this for all Britons, and I was very keen to promote the talents of the British people overseas and on the world stage. And then she talked more about her own personal life, and she said, I was given the opportunity to train as a chemist, and I grasped that with both hands. Not all women had that opportunity. I believed in working as hard as I could to achieve the very best, to prove myself. And then I asked her another question, which was about politics. And I said, Lady Thatcher, how did your soul contract relate to your time in politics? Was politics your life calling? Because she'd given up science, chemistry, being a chemist, to be a politician. And she said, I wanted to be a politician when I saw Barbara Castle interviewed. We didn't agree on many things, but her strength of purpose and belief inspired me. I thought I could do that. I believe in the power of the person, of this state, to help the person to achieve the best for their family And I thought this was really interesting. Barbara Castle was a Labour politician, so she was the opposition party. She was another very strong, very determined lady. She was very inspirational, I felt. And to see that Lady Thatcher was inspired by Barbara Castle, and that inspiration led to her really pushing forwards with this political career, I found quite interesting. I also did a little bit of reading around actually yesterday. I did this reading last week. It's taken me this long to figure out all the tech around how to show you everything I wanted to show you, but I did a bit of reading around yesterday on Barbara Castle, and her views of Lady Thatcher were quite interesting, so that any of you interested in politics, you might want to have a read. Okay, so the next question I asked her was, what impact did politics have on your life and your family? And she said, I realised that being a mother and a wife was going to be difficult as a politician as I became more successful. I had to rely on the structures around me to help, boarding school, hired help. I tried to do more for my husband. Luckily, he had his own systems and life. But as a wife, I felt I should do more, and that was difficult. I should say at this point that I did pick up an energy of him being very independent of her. He went to clubs, he met other people, and that left her feeling very alone and very, very vulnerable. He definitely played the dutiful husband when needed. I remember lots of photos and film of the two of them together. Particularly at events, and there was obviously genuine affection and respect between them. But I have to say that I didn't sense he was as faithful as he could have been to her in all respects, and I feel he blamed her for that. She was, in all respects, quite a lonely woman, both when in power and after, and I picked up that her time as Prime Minister left her family and her marriage as casualties. So then I asked her, well, what were your biggest political achievements? For all the soul contract readings, I want to know biggest achievements. For her, obviously political. So, what do you feel you achieved in your lifetime? What were you most proud of? And she said, keeping the Falklands within British control for those who wish to still be British citizens, the improvement in the economy, businesses and home ownership. She was also known for her moves forward with home ownership, and she was the Prime Minister that oversaw the selling off of a number of council houses to their tenants. And I then said to her, well, what about women in power? Because she was the first British female Prime Minister. Was this something that you were proud of, showing what women could achieve? And she said, I don't see myself as a role model. I suppose I am. Thank you for saying that, but I didn't set out to be a role model. I wanted to be a successful politician, and I'm a woman. Perhaps people will read into that. I don't, and I didn't. So that, of course, led to me asking her, because I was born in the 60s, so I was of the age to see Spitting Image, which was a popular cultural program on TV that used to look at the characters of the day. And I said to her, how did you feel about Spitting Image portraying you as a man wearing a pinstripe trouser suit and smoking a cigar around overly feminine, or let's just say not very strong men, as a harridan or a bully almost, which is, I think, how it ended out. And she said, well, I know I'm none of those things. I don't accept shirking. I don't accept anything less than 100%, but I don't consider myself to be a bully. I saw it rather as a comment on society. A strong woman could only be a man. I thought that was really interesting. A strong woman could only be a man. And here is an image, one of the many from Spitting Image, and there's John Major looking rather woebegone and a little bit told off, let's say, while she's in charge over him in her pinstripe suit. And I said, Lady Thatcher, I sense that's the answer you feel you should give. Did it make you feel unhappy or angry? Did you want to tell them to take the episodes off the air? Although, of course, I doubt they would have done. I said, after all, you were the most famous woman in Britain at that point, after the Queen. And she said, yes, my first instinct was anger. Irritation, perhaps, is a better word. But I'm not a soulless woman with no sense of humour, you know. I did see the funny side. So that was interesting. I think she did try to, you know, go along with this idea, you know, that people wanted to laugh at her and other people in politics. And so, yes, of course, I did have a funny side. I do have, you know, a sense of humour. I did see the funny side, but I feel that as well, of course, quite naturally, I would imagine, you know, she wasn't very happy. She was a bit ticked off. And then I wanted just to follow up before I went on to the next question about the Queen. So I said, Lady Thatcher, talking of the Queen, what was your relationship like with her? Many stories have come out saying that she disliked you. Was that true? And she said, well, she was the Queen. I was the Prime Minister. There was a hierarchy and I was aware of that. We weren't best buddies, bosom buddies. We didn't sit and drink tea and gossip. We talked matters of state. She asked insightful and probing questions. She was well read and knowledgeable. I didn't presume to call her a friend. She wasn't. She was the Queen and I treated her with respect and dignity as befits her position. So then I said to her, well, how do you feel about the stories saying that she disliked you? And she replied, well, I pay them no attention. I'm no longer here to worry about such things. So I think a lot of the stories came out after her death, Lady Thatcher's death. And then I moved on and said, okay, so did you complete your soul contract? And she said, I now realise I came to do a job. I came to change the landscape of British society, to equalise the playing field, to enable people to buy their home and to improve lifestyles. And so I said, well, do you think you achieved that? And she replied, well, mostly yes. I set the scene with my government and ministers, and much work has been done since to build on that. I said to her, how do you feel about those still angry and bitter at the legacies left for those in former mining communities? And she replied, I did what I felt was right at the time, what my government and I felt was right at the time. Well, and now, I asked her. I wanted to really dig deep into this. And she said, well, now, well, I'm sorry for those who still feel hard done by. I didn't wish them harm, and I'm sorry for any harm and suffering they may still be encountering, but I had a job to do, and I did it. It's been a long time since then, time perhaps to forgive and forget, time to move on. Well, then I wanted to know, how has your soul contract, in your mind, impacted on the world now? And she replied, well, more people own their own home, more people have moved up in society, social mobility, I believe, and on balance, Britons have achieved more than they may have done otherwise. So I said, Lady Thatcher, how do you feel subsequent governments and prime ministers have managed your legacy? And she replied, well, I feel some are embarrassed by me, by my legacy. They pay lip service, empty words. They're unrecognisable from my day. No backbone, no commitment, no strength of character. And she was quite adamant about that. And so I said to her, well, what do you think about the state of Britain today? And she didn't answer that question. I did wait for some time, but I didn't get an answer. Nothing came through that I could write down, but I will say that her energy was very alone when I asked that question, very lonely, and the words loneliness and isolation were those that I picked up. And I believe from this that she's distancing herself from the state of Britain today, the problems of Britain today. A true politician, some may say, is how I felt, certainly. So then I wanted to ask her, well, would you have still taken your soul contract knowing what you know now? And she replied, oh, yes, I'm a believer in Britain and in doing what I must do to help others. I wouldn't have changed my mind. I don't need to be liked or admired. I had a job to do and I did that job. I then wanted to ask her, and I will be asking as many of the people that I read for this question, controversial question. I'm happy to be controversial. And I asked, are there other people, unelected people and bodies, foreign and otherwise, who force situations and decisions on government to suit their own agendas? I felt that this is something she would have had knowledge of. And she replied, lobbyists? Yes, we have rules for lobbyists, and members of parliament and civil servants are well aware of those rules. And I said, Lady Thatcher, I'm thinking more of the self-named elites who are pervading society, let's say, in their attempts to bring their own agendas into government in order to fill their pockets whilst controlling the ordinary person in the street. You must have come across these people whilst in politics. And she replied with one word, yes. So I said, well, did you become involved with some of these people, helping them to achieve their own agendas? And she replied, well, we all did, my dear, in one form or another. Not always meaningfully, not always purposefully, but yes, we all did. Suggesting that at that time, people were involved in helping others who weren't elected, but who had an interest in what happened in, what did it used to be called, Great Britain PLC, in what was going on in the world at that time. So I said to her, well, how do you feel now seeing what's happening in Britain and around the world today? And she said, well, it's a necessary conclusion to the situation the world finds itself in, an end to the difficulties that governments are up against. And I suppose it was only natural that corporations would eat up the governments they tried to control. And she didn't feel it would end too well for the corporation. She said the little person should never be underestimated. So I said, well, how will things end for the little person then? And she said, well, the little person, and we're using inverted commas here, needs to stand up and fight, not go willingly into the dark with blinkers. Enough is standing up now and will not allow or enable the situation to continue. And so I took from that what she was trying to say was that she was aware that corporations were becoming more involved in government, that there are people in government perhaps who don't remind corporations, let's say, or perhaps their colleagues, that there are supposed to be boundaries, and that the little people, as in you and I, I'm sure, need to be aware of what's happening and make sure that that voice is heard. So then I asked her, is there a piece of advice or an observation that you would like to share? And she spoke in a way I would have imagined. Be proud of Britain, be proud of Britain's history, her fighting spirit, her indomitable spirit. If you think things are wrong, do something about it. Join a political party, set up a political party, speak out, make change through a union. Go to London or other major cities and make your voice heard. The meek lion gets nowhere, only the roaring lion is heard, which I thought was very Lady Thatcher. And so we came really to the end of the reading as her energy was starting to pull away, let's say, and I was starting to get quite exhausted. It was a long reading. And I wanted to share this with you. I was reading two photos. The first is the one that you've seen throughout this video, and then there was this one, which I thought was an interesting opposite, really, to the way that she liked to be seen. And so I connected to this image that you can see now. And there she is doing the Winston Churchill V sign, and she said, "Oh, the things that the press make you do." I don't think she was very happy to do that. I sat for a little while just to see if anything else would come through, and she said, "This interview has given me the chance to acknowledge my femininity." I did feel, I must say, a very feminine energy around Lady Thatcher. Very different to the image that was portrayed in the media, which was, as I've already said, this very alpha female, let's say. And she said this, which I thought was quite interesting. She said, "I used to say I was a politician first, woman second. It's only now I look back and realise that I should have been a woman first and a politician second." I didn't get a chance to ask her why she felt that, but I sensed that it was about wanting people to understand that she did acknowledge that sometimes she didn't make popular decisions, that she was, in her way, trying to put a sense of care and duty into her decisions, and that may not have come across very well, because I do sense, you remember I mentioned the people behind me, I do sense that they were very keen for her to be seen as no nonsense, because she had some very big things to deal with during her tenure as Prime Minister, and I sensed that these people were very keen for her to be seen as tough, no nonsense, negotiator, decision maker, and so that didn't always leave room to be touchy-feely and to be more caring, perhaps. I hope I'm not doing her a disservice by saying that, but that was what I picked up. As I got to the end of the reading, the many energies around me had disappeared. So this overwhelming feeling of so many people behind me at first had gone, and there really wasn't anyone left but her and I. They had disappeared one by one, I would say, well, possibly more than one by one, during our exchanges, leaving her alone. And I just picked up this energy of someone who was alone, not surrounded by lots of people, a little bit unsure, but actually content, I think was the word. Content to look back at what she'd done. She felt that it was a job well done. And yeah, she didn't really have any complaints about that. I will say, very interestingly, that I finished the reading, wrote it up, went through and corrected my spelling errors. Very difficult to pick up and type at the same time. And then went for lunch. And I went to talk to someone and I'd lost my voice. It was really strange. It was very strange, very croaky, very sore, small, quiet voice. And I suspect that was due to the immense amount of energy that she put into the reading and that I put into the reading. It was quite a curious photo reading. It's not something I've experienced a lot, a few times, but it's not common. And I found that quite interesting, that this big voice at the start had become a very small voice at the end. And so here we are. That's the end of the first of my Soul Contract series photo readings. This one, of course, focusing on Lady Margaret Thatcher, former Prime Minister of the UK, Great Britain. I hope you've enjoyed it. It was interesting for me. It was an interesting experiment for me. As I said, this is the first I've done in a public forum, to put onto a public forum. I certainly don't share the private readings that I do for my clients. And I found it to be utterly fascinating. And so there will be more to come in this series, and I will also be reading on people in the public eye at this time. So do keep an eye on my channel. Do feel free to share this with anyone who you feel would be interested, and I'd love it if you would like and subscribe to my channel. The more the merrier, the more we can share, the better. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.